To evoke a famous quote from quite a couple of years ago, do you know how many Israeli teams it takes to beat a team from Zagreb? 4. The reason for this is that we don't see how they will physically have the time to rebut everything we have to say, or how they will physically have the content to extend. 4 points in my speech. 1, how this affects people's physical and mental health. Secondly, why this is bad specifically for young people. Thirdly, how this creates perverse incentives in the workplace. And fourthly, how this affects the political discourse. Before that, let's just settle what this debate is not about. We do posit that people in the status quo are aware that they should find jobs and be productive to a certain extent. Everyone wants to be able to provide for themselves and for their family in the future. Everyone wants to be able to afford themselves a certain amount of leisure, to have the extra amount of money to cover for added costs. Each and every one of us has spoken to others, our parents, our friends, who have warned us of the dangers of life. This motion is not about teaching people that they have to work. This motion is about people overworking themselves to the boundaries of their physical and mental health, as stated by the info slide. How this affects physical and mental health? First point from opening government. We say this is extremely strenuous, right? Which means it's very likely for people to burn out physically and mentally. How does this look? This looks like you drinking 3 Red Bulls and taking even drugs at certain cases, studying till 4 a.m. to pass that exam. This looks like you sleeping in the office instead of sleeping in your bed, eating junk food and having a horrible diet day in, day out because you have to finish a case. This looks like you feeling guilty when you take 30 minutes to watch a series, or let alone go and grab a beer with your friends. This ends with you feeling like shit, both physically and mentally, because you close yourself off from experiences, you overwork yourself. At that point, this means you are less likely to succeed, to have less energy. If I study till 4 a.m., I'm less likely to concentrate on my exam. I might even sleep through my exam, or God forbid, my ESL final debate. If I'm constantly sleeping in my office, I might miss things. My boss might fire me or demote me. This means that at the end, not just there can be negative impacts for me, but also I feel guilty if I do not succeed. And I internalize this guilt as being a part of my own personality. Clarification? Yes, the part of this cost is significant detriment to immediate desires and needs, including your physical and mental health. That should probably be very clear. So at the point where you internalize that guilt, essentially you take it as to be a characteristic of your own person. No matter how much work I put in, I have still failed. This means you're likely to put yourself down and feel horrible about this. This means there are 2 possibilities as a consequence. First, you push yourself even harder, which at the point where you have already failed and burned yourself out is not likely to yield good results. But secondly, you are more likely to give up on certain pursuits which might be useful for you, or you might enjoy and develop mental health issues along the way. Know that success is a zero-sum game here, and know that the balance of success and probability of success does not change, because when this norm exists, everyone opts into this norm. So the people who would have succeeded anyway still succeed. Still, the people who are the most intelligent, the most suited for that job, the most hardworking, they still succeed because the levels of work in the entire society go up. So your balance of probability to succeed does not change. It's just that the path becomes harder, and the people who may have succeeded before are now less likely to succeed because they have pushed their bodies to the limits. Secondly, why is this horrible for young people? The age between like 18 and 28, which we suppose is this debate, is the age where you can do most stuff with the most freedom, right? You can depend on your parents and their money. You can have a home which you do not have to pay for. You have no family or children you have to provide for. And these are essentially your formative years, where we still should not expect from you to know exactly who and what you are. On their side, people lose the capability to create and define their own identities. On their side, I'm unlikely to take a gap year instead of choosing my college at 18 when I don't know who I am or who I want to be. On their side, people are unlikely to switch between different jobs, regardless of how low they pay, regardless of whether they look good on their CV. They take up extracurricular activities like debating, for example, to see whether this leads them to some connections or some skills, because they're pressured to start going into the mainstream work market immediately, and every other thing is seen as an act of laziness by them, by society, or by their future employers. They also lose experiences which young people should have, like going to holidays, going to parties, and so on and so forth. We see at the end of this debate, apart from that, you also miss out on a lot of friendships. Not just because you reject those friends and hanging out with them, but because you're instrumental in those friendships. You just look to see what you can gain from those friendships, not necessarily develop an emotional connection. The consequences on both sides of the house, in later life, you will be stressed. It will be shit. But you are more unhappy with your youth on their side of the house. You are less likely to be able to settle and to accept certain trade-offs and to accept certain hardships, because you will never feel that you have had the time of your life in your youth. You will feel that you've missed out on a lot. You will not have the experiences, the knowledge of having gone through various avenues, having explored various friendships and relationships to know what exactly you want to pursue. On their side, if you have a crappy job and you dislike it, you're unlikely to abandon it because you're likely to perceive that as sunk cost. That is what happens on their side of the debate. Thirdly, overwork them, force them to work overtime without paying them, because the narrative is wrong, because they want a promotion instead of you. You know that you're surrounded by people who will try to fuck you over at every step. This means at every point you are scared, you feel isolated, you feel you cannot reach out to anyone for support because that may be used against you, but also you feel bad and you blame yourself because you know you have to do that too, and you feel like a horrible person. You're between a rock and a hard place. Either I'm a horrible and immoral person, I stab others in the back, or I get stabbed. It's kill or be killed, and it's horrible. Fourthly, how does this affect political capital? This narrative means that individual responsibility is prioritized over societal responsibility. Whether or not you succeed is based on how hard you have worked. This is a blanket narrative, right? This means that if this spills into the electorate, we are less likely to fund things such as unemployment benefits, affirmative action for minorities, or welfare, right? Because the narrative is that your work can overcome any structural barrier, and that prioritizing barriers over supposedly how hard you have worked destroys meritocracy, and it's framed as destroying meritocracy, so they get to frame this as positive because they use words that people are going to paint in a positive light. Then that's why it's so perverse, and that's why it's hard to reverse that buy-in. Look, I'm just unclear as to how they're going to win, given that Lover still has 7 minutes of his speech.
All the pressures are on you right now. You'll probably remember what has prevented you from being capable of caring for your children much more than, oh, I didn't make out with Stacy at year 3. I don't know. So, and, the kill and be killed, again, it takes the case to the most extreme. They have the burden to prove that. And secondly, in a corporate world, capitalist world, it seems that's the scenario either way, because that's the one that exacerbates it. I don't see why the significance of that impact. And lastly, about helping minorities, again, to the most extreme. And if the norm helps minorities directly, we win that clash as well. So 4 cases out, 2 minutes. So let's talk about why is this time critical? Look, even if you need a system to help you get into those places, because you can't do it later. Because even if you decided what you want to do on a much later age, when you're, say, even 30, and it's not clear that you can do that, it's not clear that you're capable of making that change after that point, after you've partied, after you enjoyed. No, this is a few things. Time. As they say, you now have a family. You now have responsibilities. You now have to make sure and take care of things. You now have a lot of things weighing you down that do not allow you to go college debating all the time. Maybe Harish can do it, but most people can't. Secondly, on just a mental state, your brain is not as open to new ideas and to thinking in the same way. Your mental state is different. I'm sorry, Harish, but you know it's true. So but again, you lose also a lot of skills that you got at the point where you were in school. If you go directly to school, from school to learning, go away and you start learning again after 5-6 years because you took your time, or you took the defining decade into a different way. No. Is exactly the point where your skills to actually make those changes for yourself are lost. And again, lastly, it's just harder to make social circle when you have problems like children and everything like that, and you go to talk with college debaters. Again, I'm sorry, Harish, that's my case. So what is the big issue, and why do we need this norm? Because that's the crux here. Because, look, first, I think most individuals, most young people, when they're leaving the basic structure that they have, it's the first time in their life where they have no system or structure telling them what to do. No more parents, no more teachers, no more anything. It's the point in their life where they're actively free to do whatever they want. That is the point where there's a weighing on them that, what the hell am I supposed to be doing with that? Immense confusion, immense dissatisfaction, immense feeling of regret. All of this means that they need something to help them structure their life. They need a norm. They need something social that tells them that there's a strong incentive for you to not be lazy. Because if they're not, they're going to find another way to spend the idle. And I don't see them saying, oh, the idle time spent will be very effective ESL debating. We'll see that being also drugs. We'll see that being also excessive drinking. We'll see that being a lot of things that are terrible for them. Again, sorry.
Jonathan.
No, not yet. And again, secondly, we think that just young people can't think long-term. It's very difficult to think about 70 years from now or the effects of that, or 50 years from now, and what the education type or the classroom that can be. And we believe that even if you go to the wrong education source, you're still working towards it. That is significant. We think that it's basic human instinct to prioritize, first of all, food and the immediate interests than actually thinking long-term, because it's in our nature. That's what we are. We're hunter-gatherers. We thought immediately, and that takes away from other things. But also a collective action problem. If it's not the norm, there are just more pressures on me to go drinking. So even if the people who can counter the norm, they are more pressured and have it more difficulty for them to actually do what they want to do. So if someone wants to go and educate himself, he's no longer capable of doing it because his entire room is going to drink every night and it's bothering him and not letting him sleep. Before I continue, POI.
So if people have slightly better jobs but are miserable while working at these jobs, it's a trade-off that you are willing to accept at the opening opposition.
They are miserable if they don't have jobs, or they have very poor jobs where they have to think constantly on how to pay the next bills. When they have to think constantly on how to make sure my kids are happy when I don't have someone to replace them, a babysitter. That's the word. When there's no things like that, there is a huge difficulty in you being happy in your life. Generally, people who have more money have the capacity to make themselves happy. They can go drinking more. They can do more things. They can actually take care of their children and feel satisfied in that they have done something in their life and their legacy is important. Look, we think that there are immense things that if you push people to do, and you don't like the other type of things of just prioritizing your immediate happiness, are significant. When you prioritize, first of all, education, even if you're not in the right track, it's immensely important because you are studying, you are learning things. Even if you need to then you wanted a lawyer, then you want to be a computer scientist, that's fine. You assume responsibility over things. That is an immense skill, and that's the first time you need to do it. And we think that the defining factor is exactly the time where you need to learn the skills to be responsible in order for you to take care of children, because long term, if you have irresponsible people taking care of children, that's immense harm. Thirdly, social relationships. We want you to find a relationship that is significant. That's just not the best sex, but actually what you can actually structurally have a chance to have a relationship that will actually last, that you have more chance to care for your children. We believe that we have better relationships. But we believe that and the idea that the lazy time will be just drinking alcohol and do many negative things and self-destructive behaviors, we think that on that is enough of an impact. For all these reasons, very proud to oppose.
Our side of the house, fun. Their side of the house, you take perform better, study better. We say we would rather take the. But they say we take an extreme case, but they are also extreme. They say like you're gonna party 7 days in a week, you're gonna like bring yourself out to drug and stuff like this, and like they use all of the extreme campus on their side house, except the ones that they were supposed to use according to the motion, right? So when we talk about not working 8 to 16, but working 8 to 8, when they talk about not instrumentalizing other people in order to you get the prime and stuff like this, rebuttal is not, jokes are not rebuttal, right, to some extent. So a large part of our case has not been answered by their side and stuff like this. We still say that on our side of the house, you do make trade-offs sometimes, and you sometimes work, and you sometimes like study, depending on how, or sometimes take leisure, depending on how you feel and stuff like this.
This debate, however, according to the info slide, is about overworking yourself and deprioritizing your needs and desires significantly to the extent that you are like prioritizing stuff that you're going to get maybe long term if you succeed with this narrative, which is a crucial piece of framing here, because when Tim talks about how if all of the people applying to this narrative, then a large majority of them don't succeed. This is why when you work for EY and you work like 18 hours a day or whatever, and there's like 10,000 of you when you're 20, like maybe 1 or 2 of you actually be in EY when you're 40, because a large majority of them are just used and abused by the company because of their narrative, because people opt into this, and then later on they are promised that if you work hard, if you be really good, you're going to get benefits later on, but the benefits are not there when they grow up and stuff like this. So people still make trade-offs. People are not like your average like college guy who studies for 10 years, but people are more normal on our side of the house. And this is very give-you counterfactual, even though we shouldn't, but we should, because they are confused by this. I still feel bad when I don't study on our side of the house, because like, I should be studying for my exam and stuff like this. I still feel bad if like I don't have any income and my parents always have to give me money and stuff like this. True, I still want to party on their side of the house, and like I still want to have some fun. This is what we're saying. The balance is already struck in the status quo. This narrative that exists on their side of the house is tipping the balance towards young people working as too hard compared to what they should have, right? In the status quo, without this narrative, we have a perfectly good balance. And their burden in this debate is not to show us, or our burden in this debate is, we are taking this burden, is that the balance when you're young should be more on leisure time compared to later parts of your life, because this is the only time where you can have this balance. And you as human beings, if you are able to have one time in your life when you're going to have more fun and more free time, when you're going to have like all of the things you actually want to do, not because it's going to be useful, not because you're going to have more money later on or have more powerful friends, or like even to the extent you're going to have quit, you are doing things that matter to you now, you're doing things that truly makes you happy. So you probably are going to debate on both sides of the house, right? But on their side of the house, you're going to talk with powerful judges and like people who are going to give you impact. You're instrumentalizing people. On our side of the house, the majority of you here came here for like fun, for good time, and for all of the stuff that you came here for, good socials and stuff like this. So on our side of the house, it's unclear what they gain on their side of the house and stuff like this. But we also tell you there are incentives that ground you later necessarily if you go with the norm or not go with the norm. Most of the people want to settle down eventually when they have lived their life to the fullest in their young ages. Most of the people want job certainty later on and stuff like this. Most of the people want career and stuff like this. Most of the people have the feeling that if they live their life, now it's a time to like be more chill and stuff like this. Majority of your friends also to some extent are going to take it easier. The comparative on this side of the house is my friend who had a kid with 22, and now every time we go out or stuff like this, he has to be the responsible guy with 22, and he can never go out, he has to have a job, while the majority of us can go maybe to Athens or something like this. This is something that on their side of the house happens before, right? But they're always going to like talk about, but you're not going to be able like to be as efficient in this. Like if you don't work very hard in career, like that means you're never going to have a job and stuff like this. But look, it's unclear to us why a lot of people succeed on their side of the house, right? Because presumably, according to how this motion is phrased, people who succeed in this are people who can have connections. No matter if I'm trying or not trying to instrumentalize other people, if my daddy or my mommy is going to give me people to instrumentalize comparative to if I can't have this luxury, then on their side of the house, people who are winning and succeeding are the ones who would probably succeed anyway and stuff like this. But the comparative is this. If you work really hard on their side of the house and you don't succeed, there's no parachute for you, because this creates a narrative in society that if you work really hard, you are necessarily going to succeed. If you had this defining decade and you don't succeed later on, it's not because like there were external circumstances, like something that was pulling you down that you had no effect on, but it's because of your fault. You never worked as hard as possible in order to achieve this. That's why the pull by your bootstraps argument gets a lot worse on their side of the house, because the whole narrative is like, there is no chance that you don't succeed if you work equally as hard. I will take you later on. But a lot of people are going to have a midlife crisis, right? Because they're going to talk with other people who did not opt into this narrative. And they're going to realize when they're like 30 or 40, then they're going to maybe start spending recklessly. They're going to quit their long-term job and just like be chill and stuff like this. Disregard their partners and kids and families and friends. So they're going to necessarily make the trade-off ones that you are like not allowing them to make in their young ages, because they're constantly going to feel like, but I didn't live my life now. I should do this right now. This is where the memories argument is important, because insofar far, you would always want to be 20 years old, like have the most chill life. Once you have the memories, you realize how your life has progressed and how you chose your life to be more boring because at one time you had the more fun
Last
life.
chance.
This is your like internalized decision. Yes.
Please note, a lot of OG's argument is premised on the idea that they have a reasonable balance on their side, which enables people to still get that job security. If we prove to you that's not the case, what stands?
But I told you why there's reasonable balance inside of you right now, and there's reasonable balance outside of you right now. Because you have the influence, for example, outside of parents, but you also have the influence of your friends, and you're balancing this out. In your head, you also have the influence of, I want to party, but I should really study. This is in the status quo without the narrative that's balancing out. I also gave you a frame why the balance should not be a balance when you're young, but should be more leisure and fun, because you can never go the other way, and you can on our side of the house and stuff like this. Lastly, it's important to recognize that the experience of like fun, chilling versus work and stuff like this is the experience that makes you more of a person, right? Because especially this is important for the career, because on their side of the house you work a corporate job, you work something that's really hip now, but on our side of the house you experience a lot of stuff, you think about things, maybe you're going to invent something new because you're going to have more experiences. This is specifically important if they're going to face this debate as having career opportunities. We say career opportunities, the ones they are proving, like work really hard on the status quo, are outweighed by our benefits in which you get if you spread your knowledge and stuff like this. Similarly to when you're raising kids, if you've never experienced this period of your life, it's unlikely you're going to know how to react when your kids are going to be this age and they may be not opt into this narrative and stuff like this. For all these reasons, we're very proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech.
Look, OG lies to you when they try to sell you this perfect balance. They try to make the comparative the following. Currently, we have a perfect balance. You need to argue for the most extreme case possible when people overwork to the edge of their ability. We say, this is not the case, and I'm going to do, in exactly my speech, exactly compare the kind of two things and two options you have as a young adult. A, why you're unlikely to go to the kind of extreme cases that they talk about, but secondly, most importantly, what is the actual comparative? Because they never argue, how are you actually able to create the perfect balance? Going to a party is extremely fun for you at the moment. Why wouldn't you do it more and more, even if you want a job? And look at that. The only rationale that they actually give you for the perfect balance goes the following. Well, people want a job, want to have a family. Yes, you do, for the long term. But now when you are 20 years old, and we already analyzed to you the extreme hard, difficult situation that you are at, why you would actually be able to do so, it is very unclear for us, even if you want to. And this is the reason why we win this debate currently. But let's understand, before I even begin the comparative, two main things. A, they're not going to win about the amount of cases that they gave you and under-analyzed. Two of those are the kind of political changes that are going to happen. People are not going to get unemployment. Really, this kind of norm really doesn't create an actual legislative change. We think there are a lot of reasons to have some unemployment benefits because some people don't have a job. We don't think they're going to win of that. Even though it sounds like a big impact, it just never really reached that point, and it's very unlikely for this norm to create that. Also on the employer level, that again, not a lot of analysis on that, but the fact that this narrative makes employers more abusive. Some employers are abusive on both sides of the house. Some employers are okay on both sides of the house. We've seen that you can still choose the kind of employer that you want to be at, and it's unclear for us why this happens. Lastly, before I move on to my point, the fact that, well, it's not going to be successful for some people, we accept that. We say that even if you do all this hard work and it's not going to be successful, we can still win this debate. Why is that? On the level that A, the amount of regret that you're gonna feel. If you did everything you could when you were young, when you worked hard, when you went to school, when you did everything you could, even if you didn't succeed, you will be able to say, okay, I tried my best, and you will get something at least. You won't get the perfect job, but the fact that you as an individual want to say, say, well, I worked hard, so I'm probably at a good situation, means that you're gonna even convince yourself that you did okay, you did fine, and what you have is great, and what you worked for is great. You are less likely to feel this regret. You're more likely to feel regret when you partied, you're 20 years old, when you partied when you're 20, when you didn't study enough, when you didn't do just hard, and then you are at a poor, miserable job, then you're gonna feel awful because it is obviously your fault. You didn't do enough, and then your feeling is horrible. So we say even if on both scenarios you're going to be in a miserable job, which might happen to some people, we want you to at least feel that you tried your best and not really feel regret for all those years. And you think a lot of people are going to succeed. Why is that? Let's understand the actual comparative. Let's look at the kind of physical mental health that they talk about. So what they say is the following. This is the kind of comparative they want to sell you. You need to argue for the fact that people not studying all night long and doing all of the things that they themselves say aren't beneficial for you. We say, as a defining decade, the things that you want the most is to pursue your life goals, meaning that you keep searching for how to do so. They say when you sleep all night, you're less likely to be awake during the exam. Right. So you're gonna do that once and then understand that this is not the way to deal with pressure. It might work for you for this one time. One exam you're gonna do a good job, but then if you lose it, if you're gonna get a bad grade, you're not gonna do it again. So this kind of mental, physical pressure that they talk about is limited. You're gonna find your ways. Yes, it takes time. You might have some pressure, but the kind of stress that you have, you're gonna find ways to deal with. More than that, they talk about stress. Well, I'm stressful. You can endure stress. It is fine. You can do that, and you think there are better ways. Most people in the 21st century endure stress, so it's utterly false. Even if, again, sounds like a great impact. Well, people will be stressful. If all the people in the 21st century a lot of the time are stressful and still have a job, still have a family, and a lot of the time are happy, we are very unclear on what this means they can win this debate. So let's understand the comparative, because A, you get stress on the other side as well. And this is the kind of thing that we analyze, which is unresponded. When you are 18, 19, 20-year-old, your life is in a crisis. You're in a mode when you now need to move out from your family house. You now don't have the school and the structure and things like that, meaning that you are extremely stressful and confused, and the kind of mindset that you have leads you to do things to the extreme on a sense of drugs, of alcohol. Why is that? It means that A, you feel like you need to fill your time with something, and the easiest thing to fill your time is drug, alcohol, and parties, because of the fact that you are very much short-term biased. You think about right now, the future is very, very scary. You don't know what to do with yourself, and it's exactly when it is the easiest thing to do is not to look for kind of job that you talk about. The easiest thing to do is to go into those kind of things that are harmful for your future more than the stress. The fact that you do drugs and you get addicted to drugs is bad for your future more than the kind of stressful situation that you are at. More than that, we say the society really encourages you to do so. You see in movies, in Hollywood movies, all those people going into and drinking so much alcohol. So it seems like the norm is to do a lot of it. And more than that, just because you're young, it is the first time you experience a lot of things, you're more likely to go to the intensity and to do the extreme, not the kind of perfect balance that you have when you're an adult. When you're 30-year-old and you know how much you can drink, this is where you get the kind of perfect balance. When you're young, when you need this kind of structure, when you needed something in your life, you're more likely to see those movies, see the kind of extremities, and go deep into drugs. It means that you are confused, but when you don't have this kind of norm, you're more likely to go into things that are harmful for you, harmful for your future, and then, as we already explained, you're less likely to get those positive things, to get a good job when you are older. So you lose on a lot of things, aren't able to do so. So what we get is the following. So let's understand what actually is the kind of comparative that we talk about. Because we say they talk about identity. You're not going to get your identity. We say the likely scenarios that we are arguing for the debate goes the following. If you need to search for life goals. This is what this norm is about. You as a 20-year-old need to find yourself. And this is what it pushes you to do. It pushes you, yes, sometimes go through 4 different degrees before I move on opening.
If on your side, people at the workplace are valued by how much they work quantitatively, how much they seek overtime, and so on and so forth, then people who intelligently prioritize their mental health get fired.
Look, on both sides of the house, it is beneficial for you on some level to work more. It is very unclear to us why those 2 extra hours make such a big impact on how employers work and work. So to understand what we say. So we say that A, what it actually means, it means that you think about your future. It means that you find out whether your job is good or not. If your employer is so abusive, as they talk about, you're more likely to go to a different job. If you keep thinking, this is my defining decade, I should pursue my life goals, I should find what's best for me, and this is not best for me. It means that it doesn't have to be the kind of job that is good for you. It is also okay for you to say, well, what I care about is my family. I want to find a good partner, and then you focus on that. It just means that you know that you need to search for it. You feel the kind of push, that exactly the kind of push that means that you are less likely to go to the kind of immediate pushes that we talk about, and more about the long term, which you need the social norm because of the collective action problem that we talk about that pushes you to do things that are harmful for you. We say in a lot of scenarios, it is effective. Working Working more means that your employers are gonna say that you're a good worker. It's gonna give you things that are beneficial for you. It means that you discover more about whether a goal is good for you or not. When you put much more effort into it, if you don't enjoy it as much, you will less likely to do so. Meaning that just this goal, even doing a lot of it, means that you are more able to understand who you are, what you want to do, and it's exactly what we argue for. I am extremely proud to. Can I start? I am baffled that this debate ended up about drugs. That is so strange. Okay, look, we're gonna give you one, why we think that this cultural norm for young adults translates into adulthood. Secondly, why we think people end up living less happy life, just logical analysis part in this debate. 2 bits. Look, we're not sure why idle time in opposition is like snorting cocaine. We think it's much more likely to be like watching Netflix. We're so confused by this whole case. Okay, we think that. Secondly, we just want to extremely say that what is huge harm? Go out drinking between age 18 and 22. Your life doesn't end at age 22. In Israel, your life only starts at age 22 when you finish the military. So you'll get a degree a bit later. Big deal. Okay? Secondly, they say they're going to regret not giving up everything, that they're going to regret not killing themselves for their degree. I think the more people I know, they regret not living their life to the fullest and not actually enjoying the life that they had, choosing things that made them happy while they had the option to do that. Then they say success is the most important thing in this debate. Yes, obviously, successful people are usually the most happy people in the world. That is just ridiculous. Most of the most successful people I know are quite miserable, sadly. Okay? Then they say it pushes you to find yourself. But we say the following thing. It pushes you to choose one career path and stick to it till the end, regardless of whether it's making you happy in the short term, regardless of whether it's something that at the end will be good for you. Because you choose one career path and you say, this is going, lawyer? That sounds good. I'll be a lawyer. I'll be a doctor. You don't question yourself on the way because that's considered idle time. Changing career is idle time. To my extension. Look. How does the cultural norm for young adults translate into adulthood? Because we say that the norms which you learn at a young age become entrenched in you in your adulthood, right? Why? First of all, we just think it's extremely intuitive, right? Psychologists, when you go to them, they're like, how did you were young? How did your parents affect you, right? This is just intuitively very correctly. But secondly, we say that personal identity is more flexible at a young age, right? You're most able to mold your personal identity, and this sticks with you at a much older age, right? Because you're searching for what works for you. But then what happens is, if you are stuck in this young age and you find that this is what you need to do, this specific norm, we say that this thing is often out of inertia and habit becomes your core characteristic values for when you are an adult. We think that when you're an adult, it's super hard to change this if at the end of the day it makes you end up being quite unhappy. And notice that open opposition agree with this. Now, why do we think that this problem that is transgender to adult life is so problematic? Because in adult life, we say that it puts you at the extreme of being actually very somebody who's it makes you have a more extreme characteristic of being too thinking about your future all the time, and at the adult life you anyway end up doing this. It just makes you more extreme at it. So, to my first, why is this really extremely important? Because we think that it ends up that adults are living just less happy lives, and we think that this is much less extreme than opening government tells you, because just nuance, right? Okay, so we think the following thing. First of all, what happens is you tend to build your self-esteem on external causes. What does this mean? You ask yourself, did I get the promotion?
Did I get the best grade in class? Did I have the most friends out of my social circuits, right? We think that this is extremely problematic because at the end of the day, these things change all the time. They're ups and downs. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. When you don't actually have a stable self-esteem, which is just built on the fact that you love yourself as the person that you are, you're oftentimes very unhappy. Why do we think that people actually do have this self-esteem on our side of the house? Because when you're taught to enjoy to love the things that make you happy in the right now, when you are like when people don't tell you like strive for something that you don't know if it'll make you happy at the end, but they tell you strive now to make yourself happy, the thing that makes you your core value turns into the fact that I am important as a human being and I should love myself and that I should then take care of myself regardless of whether I succeed because of external sources. Secondly, we think that nothing you do becomes ever good enough for you because we say that it's a slippery slope where all your life you're used to just going after the next thing, the next goal, right? We think that like you win the ESL, but then that's not good enough. You want to win the Open, okay? Then we say the following thing. You are so used to not enjoying your immediate success. You're so used to always just striving for a goal that as soon as you do actually reach your goal, the chances are that you're not even going to know what to feel at that stage, right? You don't know how you are when you don't know your personality when you actually reached your goal. So you're like, well, I'm not sure who I am now. All I know is how to characterize myself in terms of goals. So like, for example, I was pursuing a career in medicine up until very lately, until I understood that it made me extremely unhappy. When I chose to stop doing med school, I didn't know who I was for a minute. It made me extremely confused. And we say that is... And we say that overall what needs to happen here, and then all of a sudden what I did was I was like, I need to have a new goal because I don't know who I am without it, right? We say that happens worse in their side of the house because you're always searching for the next goal. You're never happy with what you get. You're always just not enjoying the moment. You don't know how to define yourself, and it ultimately means that you just always want something that you can never actually achieve, and you end up being really unsatisfied with your life. How sad is that you are unsatisfied always with what you have? It's never good enough. I'll take first.
When watching Netflix, that is not the case.
I actually think I have proven why the fact that you, when you're told that you actually should care about what you love in the status quo and how you do those specific things does actually prove that. Lastly, we think that Zagreb left a huge hole with the idea about relationships. Relationships are the most important thing for people. In long research studies in Harvard, where they tried to for 80 years to go after people and see what makes them happy, the only thing that they found was the relationships with other people, the fact that people loved them, supported them. This gets hurt immensely in their side of the house. When I'm not willing to give, because all I'm looking for from the relationship is to take and to take. When I'm not willing to be vulnerable, because I'm afraid that it'll make me look weaker. We say that when relationships are hurt, this is horrible. First of all, it makes you, everything that they say, it's so much worse because you cannot be a good worker. You cannot be a good wife or something like that if you don't feel like you're loved, if you don't have good relationships and things like that. We say that it's extremely important to actually, we think that the most important thing in this debate is to have happy adults that have fulfilling lives and don't feel like they're always striving for something they can never get. For this reason, I've never been prouder to propose.
Okay? So what did we get from top half? Basically, we said this extreme saying you're going to want anyway to have a job, and if we, in this specific narrative, is over the. We got the good response from opposition saying also have counter incentives to do things that are actually harmful. However, this does not directly main answer that we got from OG that says, great, this means that on the comparative we have a balance. This means that on the comparative we have both wants for a job and wants for fun. Meaning that we don't know at this point of the debate which one is harder, right? We don't have an actual comparative analysis of which one of our wishes we are likely to choose under the comparative. I'm going to analyze to you in my speech why comparatively, without this narrative, specifically the pressures that exist are going to be more towards the part of being idle, etc., than to do what actually is good for you in the future, meaning that we actually balance things out rather than coercing. We actually enable you to do what is actually good for you and what you would want if you wouldn't have these pressures. Before that, a few points of external rebuttal. First, to the main points that we got from OG about why they think that that under comparative we will still have the job and the things like that. Please note, they had basically a sentence on that saying, look, you still want to have a job and you will still have advice of your parents. Note that this is when you talk about the status quo. Obviously, this debate changes the status quo. Obviously, tomorrow, you wanting to have a job is influenced also by the counter-narrative, meaning that tomorrow you will want it less after you have grown less on the media, on the education, etc., that tells you want to have a job. Tomorrow, when you actually talk to your parents on their advice, they are more likely to tell you, do what you want, this is your time, you should live your life to the fullest, because this is the narrative that exists under their world. They do not get to say the status quo is going to happen as well, because they change it. And secondly, quick rebuttal to CG, and the rest will be integrated in my points. So, about the ideas of actually, if you're going to drag it into adult life. First, please note that my entire analysis will also apply to adult life. That is unlike OO. I'm not going to show to you only why teenagers are specifically like very likely to choose the easier path, but rather why also adults do this. But secondly, please note, I'm really not sure why this is something that is likely to actually drawn into adult life, given that the info slide defines it as the defining decade. This is the way that you learn about it. This is my time to live, right? This is not likely that you are going to take it when you are already 35, has a job, has a wife, etc., and you already know, according to the narrative, that now is a good time to settle down and be pleased with yourself. The rest will be integrated. Let's get to the points. So first, please note, three criteria in this argument. First, on ability, second, on incentives, and thirdly, on advice. Let's start with ability. And please note why ability is the most important criteria on actually deciding what you're going to do. Because we think that most people, when they have conflicting wishes, they will choose one that is easier for them to actually do, because this is the path of least resistance. Because when you do not know and you do not have a good mechanism to decide this is what you're going to do, but secondly, because this is the one that is most limiting, right? Because this is the one that has the highest price. We think that specifically we have few reasons to believe that your ability to actually do what is good for you in the future requires much more. Few reasons. First, in terms of the entrance bar. Please note, going to college, finding a career, it all takes time, it all takes money, it all takes going to multiple interviews, going through tests. You actually have to get accepted to these things. It is really hard. You have the incentive to have this confirmation bias of saying, I don't need it. You're likely to be more susceptible to the counter-narrative because it is so hard for you. Secondly, and fear. We think that specifically making a commitment is something that is much more frightening to you, right? Because now, it is much scarier to marry than go on random stands. It is much scarier to commit to 4 years of study than to go to one-night party, right? We think this means that you are much likelier to again be pushed towards that. Lastly, in terms of relationships, obviously, your ability to make relationships when you actually have a structure, when you actually have where to meet people, when you actually see them on a regular basis, that is more than just me going to a party but having something in common, etc., is much bigger on our side. We think that specifically my actual ability to and what I'm most susceptible to is falling on our side. Because if I have two counter narratives, under their side, I'm going to choose the one that is easier for me. Under our side, I'm going to have a stronger incentive to consider what I actually want. But secondly, let's take the exact criteria we got from OG, incentives and advice. First, an incentive. Why do they tell you that you have an incentive? Something about society wants you to have a job. This is not how capitalism works the way I know it. Capitalism is a consumption society. Capitalism has much more of an incentive to actually, and you can see it through the media, you can see it through what is the actual dominant narrative. Live now, live in the moment, buy something that will make you feel good, rather than think for the future, right? We think that this is much more likely. Also note, specifically, short-term bias is a much more important factor in how you actually choose your incentives, right? Because if I want both a job and like drugs or whatever OG characterizes this, I don't know what it is really. The idea is getting the benefit from a party, from whatever, is something that I'm going to see today. Getting the benefits from a job is going to be happening in such a long time that it is so easy for me to say, oh, but it will just be the same if I do it tomorrow. Before I move on, opening. No, because you have more money when you are adult if you have a job when you are young. You have more money when you are an adult if you go to college when you are young. They do not get to say this on their side. Lastly, on advice. Note, parents are also crucially influenced by this. The educational system is also crucially influenced by this. We think that specifically you are much more likely to actually get the narrative of live the life through the moment from your school, from your parents, etc. But more importantly, let's actually do the weighing between parents and friends, because they say, oh, there's parent advice on the one hand and friends advice on the other hand. Which is more important? Well, obviously, when we talk about 20-year-olds or so, friends. Why is that? Few reasons. First, my self-esteem is much more conditioned on people who are peers to me. Why? Because my parents' love for me is not conditioned. I'm used to it for my entire lives, etc. Specifically, the way I live right now, I know that I need to actually earn the affection of my peers, etc. Unlike my parents, and B, they are the ones who surround me most of the time, meaning that I care more about what they think. Secondly, I'm like in the point in which I search for a new family, and they are moving away from my parents' house. And thirdly, like we do think that most people want to get laid, preferably not with their families. We think that generally speaking, this means that on the weighing, yes, we get incentives on both sides, but they do not get to say this makes a balance. This is imbalanced under the comparative. We actually balance it out by giving them the narrative that actually tells them, look, think twice before you do this, you might regret it. That gives you a quote.
Okay? Very happy to stand in the close government that money, a better job, does not buy you happiness, does not make the entire 40 years in which you work a happy life. We are happy to say that maybe we are sacrificing somewhat of success in their careers in order to gain much more happiness under our side of the house. This is what oppositions do not get in this debate. This is why we win. I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, I'm going to talk about the long-term success and happiness of these people. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the short-term impacts of the motion, i.e. what is happening within this decade. Before that, quite a bit of refutation. First of all, I would just like to note that Adar had almost no engagement whatsoever with everything that came from our member's speech. The only thing that she said is she doesn't understand how this transition into the later life, ignoring the analysis that Daphne gave you specifically on that, how it happens, how specifically you build habits, how specifically you shape your mental state for that to happen, how specifically to connect to the case, you shape your mental state to actually enjoy your small successes in your life and enjoy the way that you are having your career is going, and all of that. No response whatsoever. This would be a massive problem for the op whip when it actually happens. Secondly, we say that if at their best, your harm becomes that you might pursue these things later, we are completely fine with that, right? There will come a point in your time. We think this comes sooner than you think that you actually want and need money. You want and need money for your kids, for your spouse, for whatever. You want and need money to enjoy all of the casual things in life, like going to parties, like buying alcohol, like buying drugs, whatever. You need all this kind of cash. Therefore, you're also likely to try and pursue that. But we are willing to buy it for some extent. that you might do that less. You might buy into short-term incentives and spend some more irresponsible money throughout your life. We're going to specifically tackle that and the remainder on my speech, where specifically we are fine with that and fine with that happening. They also say that you are likely to invest more within your friends. We are not sure why this happened. We think you are very likely to invest more on your friends, when you have more time to do that and more mental state to actually just hang out with friends, sometimes with which leisure time actually means. Okay, no thank you. So, let's talk about the long term. OG give you quite a lot of actually, OG only give you quite a lot of short-term benefit things. They don't actually give you a lot of long-term things. What do they give you? They give you that you feel bad when you don't succeed and you lose your identity. How do you extend and take this clash over OG? We actually explain what actually feeling bad means, how does it happen, and how you are unable to actually enjoy your work. Secondly, we're talking about what is identity here. We're talking about identity in the sense of you being able to actually enjoy yourself and your successes, and you being in a better situation there. What are we talking about specifically in our speech? Daphna has started to you and it told you two major things. The two major things that we give you are things that are shaped within this time in your young adulthood, but are carried overall. What are the two things? A, that you are very lucky to tie specifically yourself to outside causes. You are very lucky to tie yourself to what is happening in yourself. You're very lucky to tie your happiness to that success in work. You're very lucky to do that. Why? Because you didn't develop yourself as a person. You didn't actually come and enjoy your time. You didn't come and invest the time in yourself to actually understand that I can actually be happy with myself, within my own leisure time, within what I want to do with myself, with just hanging out with myself, that I'm a person that can enjoy myself for my internal reasons, just within myself or my close environment. I think this is crucial for people to understand that, to explain that extensively in the young adult, and to carry that on, to understand that happiness can come from more sources than necessarily and specifically your work. I think this is crucial for people. This is what actually being unhappy when you don't succeed actually means. This means that every time a project fails, every time you don't reach your goal, this is a time that you feel broken. This is a time you don't know what to do with yourself because you have nothing else to do, because you never experienced anything else. No thank you. But the second crucial thing Daphne gave you is to always chase ideas. You always chase the next success. You never stop and feel how good was my success kind. That means that even if you succeed, even if you get the promotion that they so want, even if you get the job that they so want, you don't actually get to enjoy that, because you're always going up for the next thing. You're always searching for the next thing specifically. You're always trying for the next promotion. You're always thinking, what can I do to better myself? You actually come to enjoy all the great things that I have done, all of the success that I brought to myself. Therefore, throughout the 40 years that you are working, throughout everywhere along your life, you enjoy yourself so much less, and we think that this is crucial. Let's then specifically compare that to what we heard from the oppositions. But at the best case of the opposition in this debate, no thank you, you actually lose some more success in your jobs. And this comes to the crucial part. Because both sides on the opening half agree that this debate happened within nuance. I think that we explained to you specifically what is the specific nuance that this narrative creates. So people are still likely to pursue jobs under their side of outside of the house, and people are still likely to pursue some happiness under the side of the house. We say specifically that we explain to you the narrative, but what happens when you pursue jobs at the first place? We say that if you pursue a job, the impact becomes you get not the exact job that you wanted, not the exact promotion that you wanted, a lesser job than you wanted. Maybe, as closing opposition said, you got some worse advice. Maybe you prioritize some short-term things there. The harms are not that great, we say. The harms of not having that amount of money do not amount to all the happiness, all of the time. Like the 10 hours job that you do, and all of the unhappiness that you feel that do not amount to some more cash in your pocket or some more success that you have. Closing. No, Daphne specifically analyzes the exact mechanism in which everything is tied to your success, and you don't actually feel the success as they go. We think that was the entire case that went unresponded to. Lastly, let's discuss the short term. First of all, we think the short term is inherently less important, because even if OG are correct and you suffer somewhat in your early youth because you party less, also also know that opening opposition said that you can't party some also under their side of the house. We think that the 40 years or so, or 50 years of your entire life, of your career and everything that's happening is more important than the short-term benefit. We think this is more important what kind of adult you actually become, because it's the vast majority of your time on this planet Earth, and we think it's just more crucial. But lastly, we actually want to say that everything that happened about the short term is actually related to stress. Daphne is the one that I've told you where stress happens less on the our side. When you don't tie yourself specifically to the job, you are less likely to be stressed about everything when you know that you have other narratives that make you happy. I'm very proud to debate in this debate with a powerhouse like Zagreb. I'm very proud to debate this debate with good friends from Israel. I'm the proudest to debate this debate with the best partner ever. Back to propose.
One may clash in my speech on self-actualization, but first of all, let me just rebut CG. I'm also going to take a POI. It's very clear at this point that what they're relying on in their argument is the wrong narrative. They're talking about a narrative of overachieving. They're talking about a narrative of specifically happiness through your work, through your success, and not happiness as a result of your work, as the consequences of your work. Where is that crucial? Because we think the main narrative here and the way it's actually presented for the majority of people that aren't insanely overachieving and aren't going to become CEOs isn't you have to do the best, you have to get every single promotion. This is the way you actually identify yourself and the way you should construct your identity, rather than you have to put in the work now so you can get that material happiness in the future. So you can feel good and be able to support your wife. So you can feel good and be able to support your kids and be happy with that. So you can feel comfortable to settle eventually and not constantly having to worry about money. This is the point at which we don't buy their characterization, at which you constantly have to pursue the next promotion and all of that. Because what the narrative clearly aims at is specifically being able just to have a stable job, just to be good enough to be able to actually sustain yourself, and specifically says that you have to sacrifice your current happiness to get your future happiness in the next, which means we don't buy their characterization, which says, but this is a narrative that forces you to not think about your happiness, to also always externalize your happiness. No, just for the short term, because that's the way the world actually works. No, thank you. Let's continue. But lastly, please note, we simply don't buy the fact that, because it always transfers to your adulthood, right? Why is that the case? Because please note, we simply think that the way the narrative is framed is specifically, this is the time you have to put effort, so in a very specific age, you'll be able not to put that effort. We think that the reason that works is because your life situations change drastically after the age of 28. The reason that narrative doesn't transfer is because suddenly you have a wife and kids. Suddenly you want to settle down. Suddenly you don't necessarily want to put in literally every time in work, because new narratives come which tells you have to stay home. You want to do to spend as much time with your family. That's why even though theoretically some narratives pass from your childhood, we think specifically this because of the fact that your life situations change, because new narratives come about your family, and because it's framed in a very specific time-limited way, this doesn't happen. Cool. I'll take you sometime. Let's talk about self-actualization, because I think something really funny happened. Because OG talked about literally like the Wolf of Wall Street, right? Like you literally snort mountains of cocaine just for you to be able to get through the day and pass the last trade, right? But then O will come and say, wait, you're being so extreme. Obviously the comparative is binge drinking and snorting heroin. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ. And then this is the point at which the main analysis they have on why is there the balance, and this is where the majority of their analysis comes, and the majority of where the analysis relies. One last quick thing that I would be mad if I didn't say. Please note, the majority of their analysis assume that I'm submitting to that narrative to the fullest extent, even if they're right about the way the narrative looks like. If we say that there are many other narratives, many other incentives to still go to these parties, we don't think that the narrative takes control of you, rather than creates a reasonable balance, maybe not the perfect one, but a reasonable one. The main analysis we get from OO is you're confused, you're missing structure, and you're short-termist, therefore, of course, you're going to go to parties all the time. Hadar gives you much more nuanced mechanisms for how exactly you're likely to actually see it, why you're unlikely to take those risks, and try to build your identity. 4 different mechanisms that were in no way in OO. First of all, the fact that oftentimes taking these risks are incredible financial barriers, right? Going to college, taking that loan, going to a slightly less paying job simply because you have better chances of promotion, right? The fact that changing your profession, if you're unlikely to succeed in it, is an incredible risk that is hard to take. Second of all, the fact that oftentimes when you start building your identity around a certain profession, it is incredibly hard. You start caring about that profession. You start trying to view your world as and you start really worrying about what happens if I fail? What happens if this doesn't work? Oftentimes, going to much simpler jobs, such as working in my dad's garage, is a much easier way for me, much more comfortable psychologically. Third of all, the fact that the entire culture around me, from songs to movies, all of that, tell me, go party, go live yourself, stuff like that. Fourth of all, the fact that oftentimes you have to remove yourself from current culture, remove yourself to what you're used to, remove yourself from your own environment, the environment you're used to. You have to move to a different city to go to college. You have to be apart from your old friends, your old family, all of that. We think that these are incredibly important mechanisms. To that we hear, wait, but you can, of course you can always do anything at the age of 22. Look, this is not really a true comparative, right? Because at the end of the day, it's incredibly hard to go to college when you're at the age of 30 or 28. It's incredibly hard to take these risks, to change your jobs, to get promotions, to work hard for it when you have a wife and kids. It's incredibly hard when other people who are younger than you, are more successful than you, have more experience than you, and it's very hard to win that job interview. Obviously, this is not a true answer. Lastly, just a few extenuous rebuttals, but first,
So the emphasize stays to maximize education, to seek more responsibility, pursue goals, do more, always push yourself. And yes, this comes at the expense of relationships, such as family at a later age.
Yes, maximize your potential at a certain point in order to get as much material happiness in the next 10 years. No, thank you. Look, the first thing we hear from OG is, overworking is the problem, Red Bulls. First of all, they really assume to a very large extent that is such an extreme extent people take the narrative actually, right? The fact that they don't just don't care about a party or anything like that, but are much more likely to take 5 Red Bulls because they have to ace that test and not just pass it to a very large extent. But second of all, they really exaggerated how bad it really is. Fine, you're gonna pull overnighters. Fine, you're gonna take 2 Red Bulls and pass that test. I really don't understand why is it the jump between that and mental health is pretty big, right? But lastly, they say, but you're unlikely to succeed. Look, intuitively, this is wrong. Okay, obviously, if a lot of people take college degrees, there's still a very good chance the majority of them would do better than they would have had if they didn't. Why? First of all, because many people would have tried their hardest anyway, even without this narrative. Second of all, because oftentimes good jobs are not a zero-sum game. If you're more likely to move to a city with better jobs or anything like that, you're much more likely to be in a better job. But lastly, the narrative doesn't say you have to be the CEO, just you have to be good enough, better than you would have had if you wouldn't take these risks in the first place. Because of all that, I beg you to oppose.